Hello and welcome to a fundraising program on behalf of the Rembrandt Chamber Players. I'm Steve Robinson, and for the next hour, we're going to hear some great music. First, 3 selections from a special Rembrandt compilation CD that was produced last year, and at the conclusion of the program, a performance by Rembrandt's pianist, Jeannie Yu, made especially for this program and recorded last week at her home. It's Mozart's last piano sonata, and Jeannie recorded it at home, and it's a beautiful recording, it's a beautiful performance, and she makes some very wonderful comments about the piece before it begins. It's very, very moving, all in all. So there will be some very great music in this hour, but note that I said this is a fundraising program. In addition to all the havoc it's brought to just about every sector of our nation, the pandemic has totally upended the classical music world, around the world and in Chicago. So this fundraising program is a way for you to help a small, independent chamber music group, the Rembrandt Chamber Players, stay afloat until they're able to resume their normal activities. I'll give you more details in a moment, but now I want to hand things over to 2 very important people.
Welcome from our house to your home, a series of concerts and fundraisers by members of the Rembrandt Chamber Musicians. I'm Sandy Morgan.
And I'm Bob Morgan. We are the founding members of the Rembrandt Chamber Musicians. Many of you know us because you have been coming to our concerts and listening and supporting us for many years.
And for those of you who don't know us, we are a chamber music ensemble that has been performing concerts in Chicago and Evanston for 30 seasons. We are comprised of strings, flute, oboe, and piano.
We'd like to thank our friend Steve Robinson, former general manager of WFMT, the Fine Arts Station, for initiating the idea for these concerts and producing them. You'll hear more from him later.
Over the course of the next 6 weeks or so, you'll have 3 opportunities to hear some of our members in concerts from each of our homes. We'll be playing our favorite solo pieces today and later in June. In between, you'll have the chance to hear a video rebroadcast of one of our most popular concerts that occurred last February 2019 with string chamber music, including the Mendelssohn Octet and the Strauss Metamorphosen arranged for 7 instruments.
By the way, it was a fabulous concert, and you won't want to miss this rebroadcast. As you know, we can't give that personal in-person experience which we all enjoy and treasure so much. But we hope in these events that we can bring some measure of joy to you in these difficult times.
Also, without these concerts, we, like so many other arts organizations, and particularly small musical organizations, are suffering some pretty trying economic times. So we hope that you'll want to support us by donating to Rembrandt after hearing us today or May 31st or later in June. Steve Robinson will give you further details. And now, without further ado, we'd like to welcome Steve Robinson to introduce the rest of the program.
Thank you, Sandy and Bob, and welcome to a special 1-hour fundraising event for Rembrandt Chamber Musicians. In this hour, we're going to hear 3 pieces from a wonderful compilation CD that Rembrandt put together last year. And then at the end, Jeannie Yu, Rembrandt's pianist, has recorded just for this program a special recording of the last Mozart piano sonata. She did it in her living room. It's a beautiful recording. She must have had some very wonderful microphones and a wonderful performance. And just before the piece, she makes some very beautiful comments, which you're going to hear. But let's get going, first of all, with music of J.S. Bach. Now, before that, this is a fundraising event, and you can see on the screen and below this movie where you can give. You can click, and you can put your contribution into the famous cart, which every website has. And your contribution is needed because the pandemic has upended everything, not only for Rembrandt, but as we know, for institutions and individuals around the world. Rembrandt has been here for 30 years, presenting the very finest chamber music in Chicago and Evanston and in surrounding areas for 30 years without interruption. Well, the pandemic has upended everything. The musicians are in crisis. They don't know what to do. The season has been canceled. We don't know about next season, but your contribution will help sustain them, will help make sure that the pandemic doesn't upset the apple cart. That'll make sure that Rembrandt will be able to continue in its mission to commission new music, to continue their educational programs, their high school competition, to bring in guest artists, one of whom we're going to hear on this program, and to keep doing what they do. So please pledge. Now, we have a matching grant. A friend of Rembrandt has pledged $1,000, so the first $1,000 that comes in during this special program will be matched dollar for dollar. So please think about supporting this wonderful organization. Don't let the pandemic end this wonderful organization. They want to keep going, and you're going to help them, because without you, without the audience, without their fans, there isn't a Rembrandt Chamber of Musicians. So please give, and give as much as you can. And remember, it's not how much you give, it's how many people take the plunge and make the pledge. And you can click and get one of those wonderful gifts. You can give at the $100 level, get all three, get any one of them for the levels there. I'm used to talking about all that more on the radio, but I don't have to anymore because it's all there on the screen for you. This is a new adventure for me. Now we're going to hear music of Bach as you pledge and as you help support Rembrandt. We're going to hear the opening movement of the Brandenburg Concerto No. 4, performed by members of Rembrandt Chamber Musicians and featuring Sandy Morgan and Jennifer Gunn flutes, Wanqing Yu violin. Let's listen to music as you pledge, as you give, of Johann Sebastian Bach. That was music of Johann Sebastian Bach, the Brandenburg Concerto No. 4, the first movement, and performed by members of Rembrandt chamber musicians, Sandy Morgan and Jennifer Gunn flute, and Wanqing Yu violin. And in a moment, we're going to hear another piece by J.S. Bach with another guest soloist, and that'll be Josephine Stopellenberg, and it'll be an aria from the Bach Wedding Cantata. You're listening and watching a special fundraising event for Rembrandt. And the idea of this program is to support them in their moment of need. It's right now. The pandemic has ended the season. If you're a fan of Rembrandt, you know that the concerts have been canceled. And as like so many other organizations around town and around the world, the arts are in a crisis right now. Now, Rembrandt has been serving Chicago and Evanston and surrounding areas for 30 years. Their mission is to play wonderful music, to commission new music, to do educational programs, to have a high school competition, and to bring in wonderful guest artists. Well, that's all kind of on the rocks for this season. And next season, we don't know. But we want Rembrandt to keep going. We don't want this pandemic to end Rembrandt chamber musicians. That would be a tragedy, and we're not going to let it happen. And this fundraising event, is for you to support them. And you can support them right now by clicking on one of the boxes that you'll see either on the screen or on the screen somewhere. Just put your click into the famous cart. There's a cart here. You've seen carts all over the place, but this cart is to support Rembrandt. And you have 3 or 4 levels to give up, but we need you to give. Now, the first $1,000 that are pledged will be matched by a very generous friend of Rembrandt. So the first $1,000 that comes in. We also have a little chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll be popping in there from time to time, and I'll let you know in chat how we're doing with the pledge drive. Won't be able to be live every minute, but this program will be up here for a couple of weeks. So if you're just tuning in on Saturday when it started, or the week after, or in 2 weeks, it's still important for you to pledge. Okay. And we have music of Bach again coming up. Then a wonderful piece at the end of the program, at the third piece, by a composer I'd never heard of, but you'll hear about him in a moment. And then at the end, Jeannie Yu, Rembrandt's pianist, made a recording just for this program of Mozart's K575, the B-flat sonata, his last sonata. It's a wonderful performance. She's a beautiful pianist. She made a very wonderful recording in her living room, and the comments that introduce it are just very touching and very moving. She's a wonderful artist, and you're going to enjoy hearing it. Well, let's turn now to a second piece by J.S. Bach. I'll look at my notes here so I get it right. This is an aria from the Wedding Cantata, BWV 202 of J.S. Bach. The special guest is soprano Josephine Stopellenberg, and she'll be joined by Bob Morgan. That wonderful obligato oboe solo you're going to hear, it's like music coming down from heaven as Bob does it. They're joined by John McFarlane, Kathleen Brower violins, Carol Cook viola, Caleb Cook cello, Ian Hollis bass, and the wonderful Stephen Altop harpsichord. So this is music from the Wedding Cantata, and as it's playing, as you're enjoying it, please make sure you keep pledging to support Rembrandt chamber musicians. Thank you. Well, that was music of J.S. Bach, our second piece on this fundraising program for Rembrandt Chamber musicians. And we heard an aria from the Bach Wedding Cantata, BWV 202. And it featured the wonderful Josephine Stapellenberg soprano, and she was joined by members of the Rembrandt Chamber musicians, Bob Morgan on oboe. You know, they say that 77% of Americans believe in angels, and that performance by Bob sounded like it was coming from heaven, so maybe he's an angel. Maybe they're all angels. And that was John McFarlane and Kathleen Brower violins, Carol Cook viola, Calum Cook cello, Ian Hollis bass, and Stephen Altop harpsichord. So we have one more composition coming up from the compilation CD. It's music by Ilya Hernick. It's a short little piece, very bouncy, sprightly piece. I never heard of Ilya Hernick. I'll tell you just a bit about him that I dug up before we hear it. But you're watching and listening to a fundraising special for Rembrandt Chamber musicians. It's a fundraiser. And you can see on the screen the various levels that you can give at. 30, 60, 75, 100, or more. Don't be afraid of the or more, because the pandemic has upended Rembrandt Chamber's season. They had to cancel the season. Who knows about next season? But we do know that Rembrandt wants to continue, and they can only continue with your continued support. So that's what this fundraiser is. Now, we're pre-taping this, so it's not live, so I can't tell you how well we're doing with the $1,000 match. But a very generous fan of Rembrandt pledged $1,000 as a match. So the first $1,000 that comes in on your clicks will be matched 1-to-1. So you can pledge $1,000, and that'll finish off the match, or 100 people can give 10, or 1,000 people can give $1. That probably won't happen, but we'd like to make the 1,000, and you can do it right now. Rembrandt's mission is to bring great music to the area, to commission new music, to keep educational programs going, a competition that they have, and to bring wonderful guest artists onto their program. So you can help with that mission. So please make the click. And it's not how many people make that click, it's how many people, it's not how much you give, it's how many people take the plunge and make the pledge. So please do it right now. Well, let's listen now to the third of the excerpts from the compilation CD, and then coming up after that, this wonderful performance by Jeannie Yu of the Mozart Piano Sonata. You're going to love that, made especially for this program. So keep listening and watching. Now, let's listen to music now by Ilya Hernick. Now, Ilya Hernick was a Czech composer, lived a long life, lived to be 90. He lived from 1922 to 2013. He wrote this piece, I think, in the 1950s. It's a sprightly piece. It's called the Sonata da Camera, and it's for oboe, flute, cello, and harpsichord, and it features Sandy Morgan and Bob Morgan, Sandy on flute, Bob on oboe, Barbara Hafner cello, and David Schrader harpsichord, a guest artist for the Rembrandt Chamber musicians. So please support them, and let's listen to music now by Ilya Hernick. That was music of Ilya Hernick, and it was a piece called the Sonata da Camera for oboe, flute, cello, and harpsichord, and that was performed by Bob Morgan oboe, Sandy Morgan flute, and that was Barbara Hafner cello and David Schrader harpsichord. Ilya Hernick, who lived from 1922 to 2013, he was 90 years old, a Czech composer. That piece written in the 1950s by Ilya Hernick, a composer I never heard of. And that's one of the things about Rembrandt. You're going to hear music, and you have heard music over 30 years, that's new. They commission new music. They bring in guest artists. David Schrader, a guest artist there, as a matter of fact. And you've heard other guest artists on this performance and others on this program. This is a fundraising program for Rembrandt Chamber musicians. The pandemic has thrown their season into disarray. The musicians are panicked. All musicians are, all creative artists are, so many of us are, but Rembrandt has been here for 30 years. This fundraising event is to support them so that they can keep going with their mission. Now, we have one performance left. I've been talking about it throughout this. It's by Jeannie Yu. Now, Jeannie recorded this performance at home in her living room. It's a splendid, wonderful performance of the Mozart Kurschel 576 piano sonata, his last sonata. And Jeannie introduces it. Some very beautiful comments that she makes about the piece. And then the piece comes on, and it's just gorgeous. Mozart's last piano sonata. Now, don't make this season Rembrandt's last season. We are going to survive this with your support. Now, we had a $1,000 matching gift from an anonymous donor, close friend of Rembrandt's. We know who she is. We appreciate her support. We want you to match her contribution. Maybe it's already been matched. This show is pre-taped. We'll let you know on the chat box below this. So please click and give at one of the premium levels, the $30 level, $60, $75, and $100, or you can give more than $100 if you like, because the musicians need your support now. The funding that you're giving will go to help sustain Rembrandt and their mission to commission new music, to do programs in the schools. They have a high school competition to bring in guest artists from all over the place, and just to keep going as they have been for the last 30 years. So now let's turn to this wonderful performance by Jeannie Yu, recorded in her living room. She must have some wonderful recording equipment in addition to being a great artist. You're going to hear both. So please give as much as you can. Tell your friends about this. This tape will be up for a couple of weeks at least on this website. So please give, and thank you very much. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Jeannie Yu.
As most of us are staying at home, we're wondering what everybody else must be doing to occupy themselves. Especially musicians, I wonder what pieces they're practicing. You must be curious as to why, of all the piano repertoire available, I would have chosen to work on Mozart's Piano Sonata Kurschel 576. Well, there is a bit of a backstory. At this particular point of my life, I find myself looking backward to some unfinished business. When I was a master's student at the Juilliard School, I had an opportunity to perform for a panel of faculty members, and I played this piece, which was assigned to me by my teacher. And I played it to the best of my abilities, but I had an inkling that maybe I did not do this piece justice. I felt I just didn't get it. I thought the piece was rather odd. Subsequently, I have played many other Mozart pieces and never went back to this one. So I thought time has come to revisit, and I can gladly say that now at least there's one less unfinished business I need to tend to. Mozart Piano Sonata in D major, Kurschel 576, was his last sonata, but was not supposed to be. It was meant to be the first of 6 easy piano sonatas he wanted to write for the Princess of Prussia, in conjunction with the 6 string quartets he wanted to write for the king, of which only 3 were completed. Well, the question of the day is it easy? Well, yes, compared to some of his earlier sonatas and his concertos, it has considerably fewer notes and not as much so-called curlicues or embroidery or dramatic flashes. So from a certain technical aspect, it is rather easy. And yet, for those very same reasons, I find this piece extremely difficult. Simplicity in Mozart's aesthetics equals elegance, truth, divinity, and joy. I'm constantly amazed by the challenges of playing something simple beautifully. In the very opening of this sonata, one could not ask for a simpler motif in D major, which is a hunting call with exact same notes in both hands. The way Mozart treats this theme contrapuntally throughout is reminiscent of Baroque style. The use of stretto, which means to imitate in close succession, is evident in the first and last movements. By this time in 1789, Mozart had gone to Leipzig and had an opportunity to examine Johann Sebastian Bach's manuscripts. Mozart was blown away by the great master and would incorporate the old style of writing into the present-day style, which was the galant style, where the emphasis was melody versus accompaniment. The second movement of this sonata is a good example of this style and is, in my opinion, the heart of the piece. It starts out with a perfectly balanced and crafted singing melody in A major. Then, in the course of just 3 half steps, it morphs into the most tragic aria in F sharp minor. It is full of pathos and yearning, and an added attraction is the improvisatory, one-handed scalar passages that transitions back to the main theme, which is so very poignant. The final movement, back in the original key of D major, is an innocent-sounding allegretto in simple 2/4 meter. It is full of Mozartian lightness, humor, and operatic qualities. The coda is especially optimistic and joyful and ends without any sense of finality. It's as if to say, there's more where that came from. Mozart's K576 is perhaps not the most beautiful nor the most difficult, but a clear indicator of what was to come of his piano sonatas, which we will never know, unfortunately.
Well, that was music of Mozart, the K576 Sonata, performed so beautifully by Rembrandt Chamber Musicians pianist Jeannie Yu. And she made that recording especially for this program. No one else has heard it except you. And if you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed this program, it's a fundraising event for Rembrandt Chamber Musicians. The pandemic has upended everything. It's thrown the whole season into disarray. We don't know about next season. So we're doing this fundraiser to try to make sure that Rembrandt is able to continue next season, if there is one, the season after that, and for at least another 30 years so they can keep their wonderful projects and programming going. So please click on one of the pledge levels. You see them on the screen, 30, 60, 75, 100. Give $1,000. We had a matching gift of $1,000. I hope it's been matched by now. I'd like to thank everybody who pitched in, the board of Rembrandt Chamber Musicians, Bob and Sandy, for their doing their videotape. I'd like to thank Beth Schenker. She's the camera person behind the lens here. She also did the lighting, and she did the directing. I had on a terrible-looking pair of socks that she had me change, so that was good, and I appreciate that. And she's holding the camera. And I'd also like to thank, especially, let's get that right. Let's thank Bill Yeomans. Now, Bill has edited all this together. It's taken a long time. He's doing it as a favor to me and to Rembrandt, and I'd like to thank Bill very much for really putting in a tremendous amount of work. So thank you very much. I'm Steve Robinson. I hope you'll keep giving and pledging. Tell your friends about this video, and we'll be doing another one soon. Take care, be well, stay safe, and thanks for your support.